You are 19 years old. The rope cutting into your wrists is not tight enough to break the skin. That would be mercy. Instead, it presses just hard enough to remind you that resistance no longer matters. That whatever you once were, commander, symbol, messenger of God, has no meaning here. The cell smells wrong. Not damp stone. Not mold. Something heavier. Something older. Human rot. Fear soaked into the walls from decades of broken bodies that came before you. This place was not built to correct crimes. It was built to erase people. 2 years ago, none of this was imaginable. 2 years ago, you were not a prisoner waiting for legal annihilation. You were the most dangerous person in France. You did what kings, generals, and entire dynasties failed to do for more than a century. You cracked siege lines veteran commanders swore were unbreakable. You led soldiers who expected to die, and gave them something they had forgotten how to feel: belief. English commanders woke in the night, your name echoing in their dreams like a curse they could not escape. And still, they caught you. Your head has been shaved bare. Cold air bites into your scalp, sharp and relentless, as if punishment itself has learned how to breathe. They paraded you through the streets not as a prisoner, but as a warning. A ceremony turned inside out. Honor reversed into humiliation. Your armor is gone. Your banner is gone. Your sword is gone. And now, your voice carries no weight. When you speak, the guards do not threaten you. They do not insult you. They simply ignore you. That is how you know you are already considered finished. Today, you signed a document. The words blurred together under exhaustion and fear. You barely understood what was read aloud, but the meaning has burned itself into you permanently. Deny your saints. Your voices were demons. Your visions were lies. The mission God gave you, nothing but delusion. And wear this. A tight, humiliating garment meant not to protect you, but to reduce you. To turn a soldier back into an object. Something manageable. Something safe. You believed you were saving your life. What you actually signed was a trap so perfectly engineered that it required your consent to function. This is not simply the story of a trial. This is the story of how law was weaponized to dismantle a human being. This is how Joan of Arc was destroyed, legally. To understand how they broke her, you must understand the world she stepped into. France was dying, not metaphorically, literally. The 100 Years' War had consumed the country for over a century. 100 years of invasion, burned villages, stolen harvests, and lost generations. Entire regions grew up knowing nothing but occupation. The English controlled the north. They controlled the south. They controlled the coastline. City after city fell. Fortress after fortress surrendered. Not because France lacked soldiers, but because it lacked belief. Charles, the rightful heir to the French throne, sat in exile at Bourges, uncrowned, powerless, watching his kingdom shrink year by year. A king in theory, a spectator in reality. The war had drained more than gold. It had drained confidence. French commanders believed the English were invincible. Nobles quietly negotiated with occupiers. Parents raised their children believing victory was a bedtime story, something comforting but not real. This was no longer a war. It was an occupation wearing a war's disguise. Then, in January 1429, a girl walked into the royal court. She came from Domremy, a village so insignificant most educated men in France could not locate it on a map. She could not read. She had never wielded a sword. She had no noble blood, no education, no political value. Her name was Joan, and she said God had sent her to save France. Most laughed. Some whispered she was mad. But Joan was not insane. She was something far more dangerous. She was certain. She spoke without hesitation, without doubt, without the fear that filled every other voice in the room. She told Charles exactly what he needed to hear: that God had not abandoned France, that the English would be driven out, that suffering still had meaning. Against every rule of reason, Charles listened. Then he did something no rational king should ever do. He gave her an army. Orléans was the final lock on France's throat. The English had held it for months with barely 5,000 hardened soldiers. Every French assault had failed. Morale was shattered. Defeat was expected. Then Joan arrived. She did not bring superior tactics. She did not bring new weapons. She brought belief. When she rode toward the walls, soldiers followed, not because she commanded them, but because something about her presence made victory feel inevitable. Men who had accepted death now charged forward. Arrows flew, cannons roared, bodies fell. And somehow, impossibly, it worked. Orléans fell. The unthinkable became real. Then came another victory. Then another. Then another. French soldiers who had marched in despair now marched with purpose. English forces that had advanced with certainty began to retreat in confusion. In May 1429, Joan stood beside Charles as he was crowned King of France at Reims. A 19-year-old peasant girl in armor, standing at the center of a resurrected nation. This was not just a coronation. It was confirmation. Proof that the English were not unstoppable. Proof that occupation was not destiny. Proof that belief could move armies. Joan had returned something France believed was gone forever. Hope. By the summer of 1429, everyone understood the truth, even if no one dared say it aloud. Charles wore the crown, but Joan carried the power, and the English saw it clearly. They would not defeat her on the battlefield. So they chose the one place where faith offered no protection: a courtroom. In May 1430, Joan was captured near Compiègne, not by the English, but by Burgundian allies. French nobles who had chosen power over country. She should have been ransomed. Instead, she was sold. 10,000 livres. This was not a ransom. It was a transaction. The English were not buying a prisoner. They were buying an idea they needed erased. Joan was no longer dangerous because she could fight. She was dangerous because she proved something. That France could win. That God might favor their enemy. That occupation was not permanent. If they could destroy her credibility, they could destroy everything she represented. They would not simply execute her. They would make her testify against herself. In January 1431, Joan was brought to Rouen. Officially, it was an ecclesiastical trial. In reality, it was a performance. She was imprisoned in a military fortress instead of a convent, violating church law. Chained, guarded day and night by English soldiers, surrounded by judges loyal to her enemies. She had no lawyer, no advocate, no ally. 70 interrogations, 70 hearings, against a 19-year-old girl who could not read. And still, she held. She dismantled theological traps with calm precision. When asked whether she knew she was in God's grace, a question designed so any answer condemned her, she replied, "If I am not, may God place me there, and if I am, may He keep me there." When shown torture devices, she stated clearly that any confession gained through pain would be meaningless. She understood the law better than the men judging her. So they changed tactics. They would not break her with pain. They would break her with fear. On May 24th, 1431, Joan was taken to a public cemetery. The execution stake stood ready. She was told she would burn unless she signed. Exhausted, isolated, terrified, she signed. She believed she had chosen life. What she did not know was that medieval law had a category worse than heresy: relapse. If a heretic recanted and then returned to belief, death was automatic. No retrial. No mercy. She was returned to prison. Her head was shaved again. She was forced into a dress. Then, the dress was taken away. Left alone with soldiers, she was forced to choose between obedience and safety. She chose safety. When the judges returned and found her wearing men's clothing, and when she admitted her voices had returned, the verdict was instant. Relapsed heretic. She never understood what had happened. She believed she was telling the truth. She was writing her own death sentence. On May 30th, 1431, Joan was taken to the old market of Rouen. She asked for a crucifix. As the flames rose, she did not scream. She did not curse. She called out one name, Jesus. Again and again. An English official watching reportedly cried out, "We are lost. We have burned a saint." They burned her body until nothing remained. They scattered the ashes into the river. They wanted erasure. 25 years later, the church reopened the case. Witnesses testified. The trial was declared a fraud. Joan was cleared. She was canonized. History corrected itself. But here's the truth that should unsettle you. Joan did not die because she was weak. She died because she trusted the law. And that machine still exists. And it still works.